Hello everyone, welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we will be talking about the remote repository. So, the remote repository is a centralized location where your Git code is stored. So, when multiple developers they are working, they need a collaboration. So that collaboration can be done with the help of the remote repository. So if you see this diagram, so here so far we have discussed about the local repository, which is Git. Now you want to keep your code on the remote repository so that other developers can share their code, other developers can use your code, and you can maintain the collaboration between different developers. So GitHub is one of the remote repository which is used for this purpose. So it's a centralized location where you will have your own source code. What are the key points? So it is hosted on the server or it is hosted on the cloud. So GitHub is on cloud. So it is shared by teams. We can do push, pull, clone, pull request operations. What is pull request? That we will see when we discuss about the branches. So if different developers, those who are working on their branch, we want to review and merge that code through GitHub. So that we can do with the help of the pull request. So it is acting as a single source of truth. As I mentioned, that GitHub is one of the remote repository, but there are other repositories are available which can work similar to GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, Azure repos, code commits, and so on. So these are the popular one remote repositories. Now let us see who is the owner of this github.com. So this is the logo of GitHub. And who is the owner? Owner is Microsoft. So GitHub is a cloud-based repository hosting platform that helps teams to store the code, collaborate using Git, review the code with the pull request, and automate CI/CD pipeline. So every CI/CD pipeline starts from the source code. So GitHub is one of the very popular uh, remote repository, which is basically is a trigger point for the CI/CD pipeline. So GitHub is most popular Git hosting platform. You can imagine its popularity. Kubernetes, Docker, they all are using the GitHub repositories. So it is one of one of very popular remote repository tool for open source developers also. So if you are a open source developer, you can create unlimited public repositories in GitHub. So now, next one is that who owns this GitHub? It is basically owned by Microsoft. It is founded in 2008 and 2018. It is acquired by Microsoft. Still, it is working as a independent project, and as I mentioned that you can use this GitHub tool for open source and enterprise projects. You can create public and private repositories. How it is important for DevOps point of view. So when we are talking about the DevOps, CI/CD pipeline starting point is GitHub repositories or the Git repositories. Okay, so there it is definitely it will be used. Pull request and the code reviews, we can do it. GitHub Action, which is a CI/CD tool in GitHub, we can use that. We can also track the issues and project boards. We can use a webhook and the integration with another CI/CD pipeline tools. So it is almost every DevOps pipeline starts with GitHub. Now let us have a look, uh, a difference between GitHub and other tools. For example, GitHub and let us first see the difference between Git and GitHub, then we will see the difference between different platforms. So Git is a local version control system, whereas GitHub, it is the remote repository hosting platform. It works locally and it works on cloud. It is CLI based. This is Web plus CLI based. It is created by Linus Torvalds and it is owned by Microsoft. So Git we are using for local repository, whereas GitHub is our remote hosting Git platform. Now, if we see the difference between GitLab and Git, so the main difference is that GitHub is basically owned by Microsoft and GitLab is a GitHub action we are using here in the GitHub, but in the GitLab there is a inbuilt CI/CD pipeline tool. So GitHub is again much popular than GitLab at this moment. Now let us see the difference between GitHub and Bitbucket, which is again another remote repository tool. So this is owned by Altacian, Jira, right? So best for the open source GitHub. It is Jira centric teams. It is a CI/CD pipeline tool. We are having GitHub Action. Here we are having Bitbucket pipelines. Usage very high, and this is medium. Now, if your project is in Azure DevOps and you want to maintain the Azure repositories, so that also we can use for Azure projects. Now, let us see the difference between GitHub versus Azure repos. You have also you will also see some Azure projects, they are using repository as the GitHub repository. So GitHub is owned by Microsoft. Azure Repos is also Microsoft. GitHub ecosystem, it is Azure DevOps. This is GitHub Action CI/CD pipeline tool. Here we use Azure pipeline tool, and it is general DevOps, and it is Azure centric organizations. So Azure Repo is mainly used for Azure DevOps. Same way for AWS, we are having code commit, which is mainly used for the private repository. It is owned by Amazon. It is very limited because it is used for the AWS projects only. And we use AWS code pipeline. Uh, and again, there also we have the preference to use GitHub repository. Usage is very high in the GitHub, but AWS is only for AWS related projects. Code commit is mainly for AWS enterprise environment. Okay, so it is mandatory for a DevOps engineer to know GitHub, and also it's good to know about GitLab, Azure Repos, Bitbucket, AWS code commit. It totally depends that your organization, which remote repository tool they are using. So GitHub is the most popular. So in our upcoming lectures, we will be talking about the Git and GitHub only, okay, for version control point of view. That's it for this lecture. See you in the next lecture. Bye for now.